My name is Dale Brown. I'm 27, which I don't feel it a lot of the time. I come from Newcastle. My background is, I think, very typical of someone from Newcastle. I went to a public school. I had a fairly large group of friends. We were all quite close. I didn't have any sort of religious background or anything growing up. I wasn't baptized. I never went to church, anything like that. Sort of never had anything taught me about Christianity or anything like that from my parents growing up. My family themselves weren't religious, so it's not as if they just chose not to pass it on to the kids. It was just that they themselves actually didn't really have, they didn't go to church. I don't even think my mother was baptized, and I grew up most of my life with my mother. So there was never even any mention of it. It was never even like, oh, if you want to go to church, it's all right. It was never, we never went Sunday service. We never went to church for Easter. Never ever went to church. And there was never any sort of religious anything at all in our house, not even an inclination of it. I didn't even know about religion properly for a long time. It was something like we sang hymns in primary school, and I just thought it was something that everybody did. I didn't think anything of it. I didn't ever think about God. I didn't ever have a reason to, because there was never really an opportunity to. I had been to church, but it was never a thing where I was taken by my family as like, we're going to go and worship God. It was never anything like that. It was just like the odd little school trip here and there. So no religious background whatsoever. And in fact, the way that transpired when I was older was just that I became atheist, basically. So because I'd never had anything, I was never taught anything. I never had any reason to look into anything, so I had no belief system, basically, really, at all. Or at least I didn't feel like I did. I definitely didn't relate to religion, and it wasn't something that I was actively thinking about at all. So when I was a teenager, I would say I wouldn't say aggressively atheist, but I was definitely if someone tried to speak to me about God or about religion, I was definitely, more towards the inclination of I don't believe in that. I don't have any interest in any of that. I suppose you could say I was slightly aggressive towards it. Not to where I was I don't want to talk about it. I just literally I'm not interested, or I'll listen to what you say, but I'm not going to take any of it on board. I don't believe that. I don't believe that to be true. But obviously I feel that's because I was never taught it. So in secondary school, it's sort of 11, 12 sort of age, obviously we have lessons in RE, and I was interested in the history of religion, but I was never interested in in the worship side of it. But it's because I've always been interested in history as a general, and there's obviously a lot of history in religion. So that was the beginning and end of my interest in religion at a young age, and I saw it in my adolescent years, sort of my teenage years. It wasn't really something I was interested in it, but at a very much at a distance. And it stayed like that for a long time. It was like that for a long time. And I would never actively go out and study these things. It was just even when I had an RE lesson. Funnily enough, I did actually win an award in secondary school in RE, and there was an assembly where everyone from each subject won an award. I won an award in RE because the work that I produced, based off of what I'd actually learned in the lesson, was quite high quality, and I'd go quite in depth with it. And I was interested in what I learned. I remember learning about what a Muslim would wear historically, and about what a Christian would wear historically, and so on and so forth. And as I say, I was interested in it, so I would do quite good work. But it was just, as I say, it was just purely a history thing. I was just interested in the history of it. So sort of moving away from my teenage years and adulthood, again, still I would definitely say I identify with being an atheist. And I feel at that point in hindsight, I feel there was a lot of arrogance there, where it kind of felt cool to be an atheist in a way. I very much was in the scene of the goths, and listen to metal music and this sort of stuff. And a lot of the imagery and a lot of the not a lot, but a fair amount of the lyrics are like quite actually satanic. Um, sort of, and there is a lot of emphasis from a lot of these bands on like being anti-religious, but I don't feel like it's something that they're like particularly aggressive with. They don't at their shows they weren't saying things like we don't believe in God and you shouldn't either. It's just that that's the sort of image that they brought across. But the way that translated to me was that it was like a bad thing. It was like a bad thing to be religious. So at that point it became quite an arrogant thing. I would say I was quite an arrogant atheist, to where I just thought it was like cool because of the sort of people I was involved with and because of the sort of music I listened to and the things I watched. That was kind of, unfortunately, the mindset that developed. But thankfully, when I moved away from that sort of scene and that sort of music, I started doing a lot of. I would think a lot to myself about myself and where I'm going and what I'm doing, like in that moment, what I'm actually doing, and that led to thoughts about what's going on, like what's happening around me. And I became very aware of that, like what's going on, and not just around me, like what's going on around everything. And then I started looking into space, and you start learning things about like where the sun's positioned in relation to the Earth, and how, you know, if the sun was a little bit further away or a little bit closer, we'd either freeze or we'd burn, according to science. And following these sorts of thoughts, I actually would say I became quite agnostic as I moved away from that negative stuff, and I just started thinking more about my life, and where I was at. I became more agnostic, and I definitely did start believing in like there being like an intelligent design from a creator. But it took a long time, and I think I was like shy to admit it at first. So it was something that I felt within myself, but I never addressed it. So the transition from being atheist to agnostic came about mainly through mainly looking at space, looking at the planets and the kind of miraculous nature of them, and our planet, of course. I wasn't so much interested in like the formative years of the universe, as science calls it and stuff, because to me I was like, they have no proof of any of this, so I wasn't really particularly interested in that. I was interested in what was going on like now and what may happen. I wasn't too, although I'm interested in history, I wasn't particularly interested in the history of the formation of the universe according to science. But looking at where we are like now, and I came to like it felt like a sudden realization that this hasn't always happened by accident. And it was kind of from that moment on, I would definitely say I was much more agnostic. So I first heard about Islam in a way I feel the majority of people who are in my sort of age range and older, obviously, 9/11. So after 9/11, obviously I had quite a negative view of Islam. I didn't understand anything about it. It was just that the media portrays it in a way where this is a bad thing, this is an evil thing. And I remember as a kid, there was like lots of jokes about Muslims and Taliban and all this silly stuff. And that was not a view that I held and was like militant about it. It was just a view that I held because I was indoctrinated by the media, I would say. But that's how I first heard about Islam, through the acts of 9/11. When it came to looking into Islam as something to actually like study, that came about mainly through asking questions to Muslims about, why does the Quran say this? Why does the Quran say that? Why do Muslims do this? Why do Muslim women dress this way? And following those questions, I realized very quickly that I'd been given the wrong impression of Islam and I had it all wrong. So after asking questions to Muslims, online mainly, and realizing that I've got the wrong impression, I started looking into it from a much different perspective. And from a perspective of, well, if I've got it wrong, then I want to know what I can do to get it right. And I thought, well, in order to do that, you're going to have to actually study it. You're going to have to go out and you're going to have to, if you really want to know the answers to these questions properly, You're going to have to go out and ask more. So I did. I went out and I asked more, but I asked it from a different, not from an aggressive angle. I would ask things like, so why is Islam portrayed in this way? Why for so many years have I had this impression of Islam? And like, how could I have got it so wrong? So when I was asking these questions, I was asking them to just people that I knew online. I've always, I've lived like a lot of my life, my younger life, online. I've very much been like part of communities online, message boards, forums, this sort of thing. So naturally along the way, you meet all sorts of people, and I picked up some Muslim friends, and so I asked them, and thankfully they pointed me towards like the correct teachings and with the correct sources. After I asked these questions and I got the answers that I got, which were it would just shock me to my core about how wrong I got it, about how wrong I had been in my thinking and what I thought was true about Islam. I started looking into like quotes from the Quran, Hadith, even though I didn't know what any of this meant. I looked into them, and I didn't know if any of it was authentic. I didn't have the correct understanding of it, but the stuff that I was reading, I found it very, very like eloquent, and I found it very easy to understand, and I related to a lot of it as well. And following that, I just had a general interest in the religion. I thought, well, this is quite nice. What I'm learning about is quite nice. What I'm reading is quite, I find it quite beautiful and interesting. So, sort of, that's how it was at first. It was just reading very simple little things here and there. I asked somebody so I'm reading little bits from the Quran, I'm reading little bits from Hadith, I'm quite interested in it. How can I learn about the history of it? And I can't remember who it was, and I can't remember who it was that I watched. But I just watched a very brief summary of the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And I thought that was very interesting. And at this point, it wasn't a case of like, oh, I'm thinking about becoming a Muslim. It was just that I've always, if I find something that I'm interested in, I tend to delve quite deep into it, like quite quickly. I don't like to just let it sit. I like to, my mind opens up to many different things, and I just like to absorb information. And that's very much what I started to do with Islam. So once I realized that there's a plethora of information online, especially YouTube, there's just hours and hours and hours of footage and lectures. I would stick things on and just either let it play in the background, or I'd listen to it while I was like doing the dishes, or just it was just a subject that I became interested in. So it was just like some little private study that I was doing. And slowly along the way, the more I was relating to it and the more I was accepting it as the truth, and learning the teachings of Islam, and not just the history of it, like the actual what it takes to be a Muslim and things like this. These things all just kind of, one thing led to another, and slowly but surely I started thinking to myself, well, maybe this is what I've been looking for in terms of, because obviously I had an idea of there being a creator, and I thought, well, maybe this is it. Around the time I was studying Islam on my own, because I was studying on my own, I never went to any organizations, I never went to a mosque. I didn't have any Muslim friends that I knew in person. It was only people that I knew online, and they were very much, they weren't students of knowledge or anything like this. They were just Muslim friends that I knew. It was somebody that I could go to and actually like ask a question to, and this was still going on. I was still asking questions. I'd see things on, like I saw a video of Blade Runners on YouTube, and I was like, what's this all about? Like I didn't know Islam was like this. And then they said, oh, well, very much like Christianity and other religions, there are people who take these things that they've learned and they give it their own interpretation. They say, now, that's not what you should do. You shouldn't give things your own interpretation. They reminded me, think about what you were doing when you were learning things from the news and giving it no context and just taking it and rolling with it. said you were taught something and you just accepted it. And they said, and that's very much what a lot of people tend to do with not just religion, but with a lot of things. And unfortunately, when that happens, people do tend to deviate and do their own thing. That's pretty much what I was told. And so I thought, well, okay, I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in that sort of stuff. I'm interested in what I was learning about the beautiful things from Islam, about giving in charity, and about caring for orphans, and all these beautiful things that I was learning. I thought that I want to learn about that. And if someone's telling me that's not a part of it, and I trust them, then okay, that's not a part of it. And that was very much the view that I held. I didn't let that negative stuff that I saw deviate me away from what I was learning, because I was very much interested in it. So one of the key turning points for me on my sort of journey towards Islam, which I didn't even realize it was a journey at the time, but one of the sort of key turning points for me was actually learning about the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Learning about the miraculous nature of how the Quran came about. And obviously, as I said earlier, I thought quotes from the Quran, I found them to be very eloquent, I found them to be very beautiful. And I enjoyed reading them in small doses. And thinking about the eloquence of it and the beauty of it, naturally when I learned that the Prophet Muhammad couldn't read or write, peace be upon him, it was very much it blew my mind. And I very much thought myself, like, if that is true, then this, like, pieces suddenly started falling into place. And as I was saying earlier about maybe this is what I've been looking for, that was very much like a light bulb moment. I can feel a bit of goosebumps on my arms right now thinking about it again, because I remember how I felt in that moment. I very much felt like my eyes had all of a sudden became opened, and it was like a door had just been opened, and it felt incredible. And I remember things felt like weird that day. Things felt very strange that day. And nothing particularly miraculous happened in that day. Just things just felt like strange. It was like I was very acutely aware of. It was like I suddenly realized, like, I'm here and I'm alive, and like what am I doing? And it was a huge moment and a huge turning point for me. And after that moment, I started looking into it from a different perspective. It wasn't just something that I was interested in anymore. It wasn't just that I found it beautiful. It was that, but it became more. After that moment, it became very much a thing of, like, I need to know if this is true. I need to know if this is true. So that was what I focused on next. On, yes, I'm reading all this stuff and it sounds great, but is it actually true? And then I came across the history of the Quran, like the up to today. And when I learned that it had been preserved, and somebody said to me, "Oh, you know, like, not the Quran's never been changed. It's never been changed, like, at all, not even a letter." And I had a previous knowledge of, like, the Bible being altered and changed and verses removed and added. And when somebody told me that, I kind of, for a moment, I didn't just take it at face value. I was like, I found it unbelievable. I thought to myself, surely not. It felt impossible. And I thought, like, this sounds too good to be true. That was the feeling that I had. I thought, this is too good to be true. But I didn't discount it or shy away from it. I just thought, well, you're telling me that. Now I need to know if this is true or not. I'm not just going to take it on face value, because I want to know. And I think there was a seismic shift inside myself, where it was no longer just taking in information. It was actually, I really need to know if this is true. And through research and watching videos and reading like certain little facts about, there's been institutes that have studied the Quran, they've studied ancient manuscripts of the Quran, and they unanimously agree. And at that point, I thought, well, that's proof enough to me. And I felt confident that what I'd been told was true. From that moment on, I realized very quickly that perhaps like I need to pursue this, and perhaps I need to maybe speak to, perhaps maybe I need to actually speak to somebody about this, like face to face. And what I didn't realize is that what I felt inside was pretty much like I need to become a Muslim. So the way that came about was that I was looking online for places in Newcastle that did shahadas. That was the way I was like looking at it. Where can I like do a shahada? And I actually found videos of a dawah stand in Newcastle city centre, and it was a charitable organisation called IDC, Islamic Diversity Centre. The videos were like quite old. The videos were like 3-4 years old, and at the time, and I thought to myself, I wonder if they still do that. I wonder if they still do shahadas on the street like that. That's the way I seen it. I was like, it was something that you went and did, like in an official setting. So I was thinking to myself like, oh, like I wish I could just do it now. Like I wish I could just do it in the house now. I didn't think you could. I didn't think you could do it like that. I thought you had to like go and do it in front of an imam and sign a certificate and so I was like, man, I don't know where I can go and do this shahada. So I was like, I was waiting and waiting, thinking like, well, where should I go? Should I email them? Should I ring them? And obviously, the whole time that this is going on, I haven't just like left what I was learning. I was still learning, and I was watching more and more and more, and I was just absorbing it all. And I came across a video about taking your shahada, and I learned about the Prophet's uncle, peace be upon him, and I learned about how the Prophet, peace be upon him, like asked and begged for him to be for his uncle to be given Jannah, but his uncle wouldn't take a shahada. Even on his deathbed, his uncle wouldn't take a shahada, and so I believe a verse was revealed which said basically like, you know, that's not going to happen. He hasn't given his shahada, so he's not going to be given Jannah. So that was profound for me, and I thought, well, if that was the Prophet Muhammad's uncle, then who am I? And if I don't take mine, then what's going to happen to me? And even now thinking about it, I was terrified of what may happen, and I became like very careful all of a sudden about what I was doing. If I was outside, I was like, I want to like really make sure that I like wait before I cross the road, and I'm gonna really try to be very careful about what it is I'm doing. And I very quickly realized that I need to take my shahada, and I need to do it like now. So I thought, well, okay, well, if I can't go and see somebody and do it, then I'll just try to do it on my own. So I found a video of somebody taking their shahada, and then I remember on YouTube I tried to find a video of it just being said, plain, nothing in the background, and I just tried to emulate it. I listened back and forth, and I was saying it, and then the video was saying it, and then I'd say it, and I was saying it back and forth, and it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like I was it didn't feel like I was doing it properly, because I had this notion that you have to go and do it in an official setting. So I thought, right, okay, well, enough of this. And I just looked for a mosque in my local area. And the first one that came up on Google was Newcastle Central Mosque, the mosque that we're in now. And it was literally from one day to the next. I just turned up to the mosque at about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And I just knocked on the door to the admin office, and a brother called Mahi came out the admin office, and I just said like, oh, I want to take my shahada. Like, how do I do that? And then he greeted me and asked me if I wanted some tea, and he asked me to sit in the mosque, and he would call the imam, because he said afternoon prayers are going to be happening soon. So I did. I came and I sat and I waited patiently, and he asked me again, "Do you want some tea?" I politely declined, but I always wish I took it. And the Imam of Newcastle Central Mosque, Imam Abdul Basit, and he came and shook my hand, and he says, like, "I understand you want to take your Shahada," and he says, he said, "I'd like to speak to you for a little while and just understand, like, make sure that you have the correct understanding and that you're ready." And I assured him, I've been learning for quite a little while now, and I'm quite sure, and I feel like I'm past the point of being ready, and I feel like I need to. And he felt like he needed to speak to me. The Imam felt like he wanted to speak to me just to be sure. So we had a nice conversation for maybe half an hour, maybe 40 minutes. And then the afternoon prayers were performed, and then when everyone was gone, the Imam said, "Well, if you're ready, then we'll have a seat, and we'll nice and calm, and we'll do it." I asked for nobody else to be there. I didn't want a big audience. I didn't want anything like that. I asked for nobody else to be there, and we affirmed back and forth, like, why is it that you want to become a Muslim? And it wasn't in a nasty way. He was just asking me, like, are you sure? Like, are you sure you know what being a Muslim means? And once he was sure, then he helped me take my Shahada. And after that moment, that's when I felt right. And I officially became a Muslim. Alhamdulillah. Immediately after I took my Shahada, I felt very content and relieved, and I felt a sense of security, because at that point I knew that I had to take it. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. At first I wanted to do it, and then it became, through seeking knowledge, I learned that it was something that I had to do. If I really believed it, which I did, and I was sincere about it, which I was, I thought, well, naturally I just thought I wanted to do it, but then it became something that I had to do. So of course, because I did it and I felt in my heart that I had to, I felt like I'd really achieved something. And as I say, I felt very secure, and I felt very relieved, because I knew what would have happened had I not have done that, and had I have died. I knew what would have happened, and I was, as I said earlier, I was absolutely terrified of that. And between, like, knowing that I had to take Shahada and actually taking it, it was a matter of days, and it was a terrifying few days. It really was terrifying, because I was learning about Jahannam, hellfire, and I was terrified of it. I really was terrified of it, and I very much enjoyed the idea of Jannah, paradise. And I thought, well, I don't want to go to Jahannam. So I thought, because at first I was thinking to myself, well, is it not just enough to just believe I'm a Muslim? But then I learned very quickly, no, it's not enough. It's really not enough. And obviously learning about the pillars of faith, and that you have to take a Shahada to be a Muslim. It's obligatory. You have to do it. So yeah, I felt very good. I felt positive. I felt almost like cleansed. And then, funnily enough, I learned that is exactly what the Shahada does to you. It spiritually cleanses you. And it was funny, because that's actually how I felt. And I remember, as I say, I came to the mosque about 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I left at about maybe 5:30, and I remember I went home and I felt so, like, relieved that I finally done it, that I actually just wanted to sleep. And I just slept, and I had just the most wonderful nap. And I woke up, and it was like, it was literally like, it was like I woke up and I was like, the first thing I thought was just like, I did it. I actually did it. And I just felt so, like, happy, and I was just like, right, like, this is, I thought, like, this is like a new beginning for me. I can really try and make a go of my life, and I just felt really, really positive. And very quickly there was a lot of positive changes that came about from becoming Muslim. I mean, for example, the very next day after I took Shahada, funnily enough, the timing of it was impeccable, because the next day a new Muslim class was starting, a 12 or 13-week new Muslim class with them, with IDC in Newcastle. And I just thought the timing of it couldn't have been any better. I had no previous knowledge that this class was going to happen. So it was on the 22nd of January. I took Shahada, and on the 23rd of January, the new Muslim class started, which I enrolled to. And it was nice where, because I still obviously wanted to learn. It didn't end there. I still wanted to learn. I wanted to learn like as much as I could. I was like desperate for knowledge. And it was nice to be able to, like, on a weekly basis, to be able to come meet brothers who are in the same situation as me, like freshly reverted, and to be able to actually like sit down in a classroom environment and be taught about the religion. And it just felt so right. The timing of it and everything, I just thought like this is exactly what was meant to happen, and I was like very aware of that. And obviously, as time goes on, you learn about like everything's pre-written for you, everything's like predestined. And it just exacerbated it helped with that feeling of like this was right, this was the right decision for me, and this is exactly what I was meant to do. And yeah, it felt amazing to become a Muslim. And I've never had any regrets. I've never doubted it. I say it's been a little bit over a year now, and I feel very confident. I feel very very good about being a Muslim. So it was the class was quite in depth, but it touched on a lot of subjects, but in a very basic way. It taught you the foundations of what you needed to know, and it taught you what was right and what was wrong. And I very much felt like it helped because, as I say, I was just sitting on my own. Just whatever it was that I became interested in on YouTube, I would just watch it. I wouldn't really go and look at the references. If something was really like shaking me to my core, like about the revelation of the Quran and stuff like this, then I would go and ask for a reference. But with most stuff, I was just happy to be taking in the knowledge. So actually being in an environment where there's somebody teaching me and they're saying this is the correct teaching and this is wrong, like learning about shirk and the opposite to it, and learning about Aqidah and Tawheed. That's the sort of stuff that we were being taught, and that's what I needed because, repeating myself, but just sitting on my own and learning just here and there, whatever it is I felt like clicking on, or whatever article it is I felt like reading. In hindsight, I realised how dangerous that could be, because I did come across videos of Blade Runners and stuff like this, and perhaps had I not have been so against it initially, perhaps I would have thought, oh, well, what I've looked at so far, I think is true. So maybe I need to look a bit further into this. So thankfully, I never delved into stuff like that, learning on my own. But I feel like that secured me in a position where I'm learning the right correct teachings, and yeah, it helped me a lot with what it is I should be learning about. And because there was every lesson each week was about a particular subject, I would become interested in that one subject, and I wouldn't be trying to learn about like the A, B's and C's of Islam as I was doing, which I did start to realise that doing that can overburden a person. And when you learn about what's halal and haram, it can become a bit overwhelming when you're thinking like there's the stuff that I've been doing in my life which I'm not allowed to do anymore. So sitting in that classroom environment and learning like that was very beneficial, and I'd recommend anybody to. It's all well and good sitting and learning on your own, and it is a good thing, but I'd highly recommend going to a teacher. Even if you're scared of it, just go to a teacher and get some real like authentic knowledge from in the correct way. So since becoming a Muslim, the community in Newcastle has been very, very supportive, and with help from brothers from the mosque and especially IDC, I've got a big network of brothers that I now know. I feel like I would never have had any reason to have been friends with these brothers in the past, but since becoming Muslim, all of that's just sort of set to one side and say, well, we're brothers now. and there's a very good support network in place to where if I have a question, I know that I know who I can go and ask questions to, and I know that if they don't know, they'll pass me on to somebody who does. And it's not just about learning about Islam. I can go to these brothers for anything, because they're my brothers, and I know that, and I feel confident in that, and it's a very good thing to have. I didn't have that before in my previous. I didn't have like a support network. I didn't have people I could go to. My background's one where my family's like quite split apart. I come from quite a broken home, and I've struggled a lot in the past with like mental health and stuff like that. And having that support network in place, although it's still something that I struggle with, it's definitely a benefit. The support network I have is definitely a benefit that I can take full advantage of, and I have done, and I will continue to do so, because that's exactly what it's part of exactly what the brothers are there for, and I very much know that, and I feel fully confident in that. If somebody was looking into Islam, my advice to them would be to go to the best source of knowledge that you can, the best source of knowledge that's available to you, which first and foremost would be the Quran. Go to the Quran and read it. So moving forward, in terms of myself, what it is I want to do next, sort of next big step to try and strengthen my faith, is I really want to learn Arabic, mainly so that I can actually read the Quran in the way it's meant to be read. It's wonderful, all the translations that we have of the Quran. It's very simple to go and find an English translation of the Quran. Being able to actually read it in Arabic would be something entirely different, and something very beneficial, and something that I feel like a longing to be able to just pick up the Quran, a proper Arabic Quran, and actually just be able to read it and understand it. And not just the Quran, it's so I can read. There's many books, beneficial books, great books, which haven't been translated into English. I don't actually have a chance to read them. I get a chance to just hear about them, and you get little snippets here and there from lectures and from teachers. And they always recommend them. I think, but I can't read them. I can't take advantage of that knowledge because it's not been translated into English yet. And well, it's not a reason to hold me back. I'm holding myself back because I'm not doing something that could be very beneficial and something which could really, really move me forward in my religion. For me, the most important thing I've learned in life is don't take anything for granted. Don't take anything for granted, because as a Muslim, I've learned now that it doesn't matter what I want to do. It doesn't matter what I've got planned for myself, because it could all change in a second. It could change right now. And it takes one very, very small thing for everything to change. And things can have such a knock-on effect to where it could seem something so small and insignificant can really can turn into something else entirely. And it makes me think back to that moment when I realized that I need to take my Shahada. It makes me think of that, and how that like fear that I felt, that profound fear of I don't know what's going to happen. And I found myself being very careful about what I was like physically what I was doing in case something happened and I died. And before that, what I was doing was taking everything for granted, and I was, oh well, I'll do it when I can, and I was just like not taking it seriously. And it's a very dangerous thing to take anything for granted. It's a very, very dangerous thing, because for me it's arrogant. It's just pure arrogance, whether it's accidental or on purpose. Arrogance itself, it's a very dangerous thing. It's a very bad thing. Thinking about that and thinking about the position that I was in and the position that I'm in now, I realised in hindsight how much of my life I took for granted. And I could never realize at the time how big of an impact that was actually having on my quality of life. Because if you're taking everything for granted, it's going to be difficult to think of any goals or actually achieve anything, because it's just going to be whatever happens, happens. Like, and just thinking about it like that and just being so blasé about it, it's not a good thing. But taking it more serious and thinking, well, yeah, actually, whatever happens, happens. So, like, what are you doing? What are you doing about your life? And taking charge of life and not taking it for granted no more. Taking charge of my life and not taking it for granted anymore. It's had a profound effect to where now, like, I know what I want to do in life, and I concentrate very much on what I'm doing now. And I realize that it really does not matter what I've got planned for myself. It doesn't matter what I want to do, because Allah's the one who's going to decide what I do, when I do it, how I do it, and He's going to know exactly what I think about it. So if I don't appreciate that, and I do take it for granted, then I'm doing a disservice against Him, and I'm doing a disservice against myself, and I don't want to do that. So taking your life for granted and not caring about what it is you're doing or where you're going, and not putting any thought into it, it's a very dangerous thing. And you'll just feel like empty. You'll have no real, proper, true ambition. You can't do, if you're taking everything for granted, you can't really, in my opinion, have any proper goals or ambition. Or if you do, I don't really think you're going to do a very good job of fulfilling them. So